Globe believers are taught that the flat horizon seen all around them is actually the physical curvature of their Earth globe. They will often claim to have seen the horizon slightly curving when observed from an airplane window, or claim that ships disappearing beyond the horizon have descended below the Earth's curvature. Both of these presuppose and imply that the observable horizon is the literal physical curvature of the globe. In fact, Aristotle's very first alleged proof of the globe, recorded over 2,000 years ago, rested upon this assumption. But is this accurate? Is the horizon really the curvature of the Earth? In his book On the Heavens, Aristotle's first proof given for the globe was the appearance of ships sailing away from an observer to disappear from the bottom first. He wrote, "Our observation at sea also proves this, for ships sailing away do not disappear at once, but gradually sink, so that their hulls are hidden first, and later the sails." In other words, the fact that ships sailing away from an observer disappear from sight, starting with their lowest part, gradually hiding more until the entire vessel becomes invisible, is offered as proof that the ship is descending below the Earth's curvature. Unfortunately, Aristotle lived in a time before the invention of binoculars, telescopes, and zoom cameras, all of which can now be used to bring ships and other objects hidden beyond the horizon back into full view. It turns out, objects disappearing at the limit of your vision are going beyond the horizon, not beneath the horizon. As every art student learns, the horizon is actually the vanishing point of perspective from a given observer's point of view, and not, as Aristotle and many modern globe believers claim, the beginning of Earth's curvature. The horizon line is completely subjective and varies in distance depending on factors like the weather, the observer's height, and the strength of their eyesight or instruments. Objects approaching or near the horizon are naturally hidden from sight bottom first due to the very nature of human perception. When looking down a long hallway, the floor beneath your feet appears to gradually rise up to the level of your eyes. Likewise, the ceiling over your head seems to gradually sink down in the distance until reaching the level of your eyes. Lastly, the walls on both sides of you also appear to close in, gradually approaching a center point where the rising floor, the sinking ceiling, and the narrowing walls all converge. Clearly, however, this center point at the limit of our perception is just a subjective phenomenon based on how our eyes interpret reality. We know by continuing to walk down the hallway that the floor doesn't actually rise, the ceiling doesn't actually sink, and the walls don't actually close in. This optical illusion, also well known to every art student, is called the law of perspective. The horizon itself is simply the vanishing line of perspective from a given observer's point of view, where the apparently rising Earth meets the apparently sinking sky at the very limit of perception. Globe believers are mistaking this subjective limit of our eyesight for the objective physical curvature of the Earth. Everyone knows a hallway floor doesn't actually rise from the level of our feet below us to the level of our eyes off in the distance. But globe believers assume that people, ships, and other objects on the ground, as they recede from sight, are literally sinking beneath the curvature of the Earth. Again, however, this faulty assumption can be proven wrong with binoculars, telescopes, or zoom cameras. Find a long, flat expanse, like a plain, field, or road, and while observing from a few feet off the ground, have a partner begin to walk straight away from your position. Once they have walked a certain distance, it will become apparent that you can no longer see their feet, as the narrow angle of inclination between your eyes and their feet begins to obscure anything so low at that distance. The farther they walk away from your position, the more their legs and lower body will begin to disappear as a natural result of perspective and vanishing point. The fact that objects receding from an observer's position gradually disappear from view bottom to top is simply a natural function of how our eyes work, and is not evidence that distant objects are descending beneath the supposed curvature of the earth. Similarly, everyone knows that a long line of streetlights are not actually getting shorter off in the distance, but globe believers assume that the sun, planes, birds, and other objects overhead, as they recede from sight, are literally sinking beneath the curvature of the earth. Yet again, however, this faulty assumption can be proven wrong with binoculars, telescopes, or zoom cameras. At sunset, wait until the sun has half disappeared beneath the horizon line. Then, using equipment with adequate magnification capability, by zooming into the half-set sun, you can bring the entire sun back into full view, often with a significant portion of sky reappearing between the sun and horizon, proving that the sun is simply moving away from your position and not physically descending beneath the curvature of a globe. Whether standing at sea level, atop Mount Everest, or flying in an airplane, the horizontal horizon line always rises to meet the eye level of the observer and remains perfectly flat 360 degrees around. If the horizon was actually the physical curvature of the earth, as globe believers are taught, it would not and could not rise along with the observer. If the horizon was the objective physical curvature of earth, and not a subjective vanishing line of perspective, it would by necessity be fixed in position, and any observer gaining altitude would have to look down to see it, more and more the higher they climbed. At sea level, on a clear day, without magnification, the horizon may be seen about 3 miles away. Yet in a high-altitude balloon, at 100,000 feet in altitude, on a clear day, and without magnification, it is often possible to see hundreds of miles between yourself and the horizon. The same horizon that obscures ships from just a few miles away at sea level rises and expands as an observer gains altitude, proving that ships disappearing beyond it are not descending beneath the supposed curvature of the earth. When pressed on this double standard, stubborn globe believers will often just move the goalpost and insist the curvature they claimed obscured ships a few miles away at sea level still exists at altitude, but only starts curving after hundreds of miles now.